Welcome to the CT Educator podcast. I am your host, Karina Hogan. I am a registered CT technologist with 20 years of experience and knowledge. I help new CT technologists level up their CT training so that you can become a successful technologist. I'm also a mom and committed to sharing my knowledge and expertise to help you build your confidence, know the CT basics so that you can deliver quality patient care. So let's get into it. Hello. Welcome back. Welcome back to the podcast, wonderful technologists. Welcome back. So I can't believe in a few days it's going to be Thanksgiving. Has anybody just taken the time to realize how fast the holidays have approached us and how close we are to 2025? I've just reflected on this and I'm like, holy crap. The fucking holidays are here and we got to get our shit in order. Okay. So it's kind of like a whirlwind. And I know my girls are getting ready to be on Thanksgiving break. So this should be freaking exciting. So lots of stuff happening for the CT Educator podcast. If you haven't caught a few of my other previous podcast episodes, the CT Educator is coming to YouTube January of 2025. Very exciting update. I'm super excited to give you these video portions of the podcast on YouTube so you can watch it in long form and create more educational visual content for you guys. Okay. Now, I know I do Instagram Reels and things like that, but this will be longer form to really get you to elevate your skills. Now, if you really want to elevate your skills and be the go-to CT tech for the next 6 months, you come into my container. I will coach you. I will mentor you in becoming the go-to CT tech where you can walk into any facility, any hospital, any clinic, scan from day one. Okay. I have excellent courses. I have a lot of how-to videos, a lot of guides, downloads, you name it. Live workshop classes. There will be 4 each month for the next 6 months. So get into my program, guys. So there is a link in the show notes. Make sure you guys check that out. Okay. I also do have a 90-day accelerated course where in 90 days, I can get you up to speed, get you to get your skills set up to par so you can take that CT registry. So make sure you check all the links in the show notes regarding that, okay? So let's get into today's episode. So today's episode, I feel it's very, very important. It's going to be a little bit more advanced, but it's one of the things that we need to talk about because it's important not only when you're on the CT floor, but also on the CT registry. So understanding CT physics without the headache. So I'm going to take a few concepts when it comes to the physics part of CT. I'm going to kind of break it down and just go ahead and give you some good tips when it comes to these strategies, okay? So we know CT physics can be very complex. CT as a whole is a very complex department. There's a lot of moving parts here, okay? But these are some principles and some strategies that you need to know in your CT training and for the registry, okay? Because some of these things do come up on the registry. I can't necessarily tell you what, but it's very important to make sure that you study these physics and these principles. So we are going to talk about 2 different scan modes, okay, when it comes to imaging parameters. So we're going to talk about axial scanning and helical scanning. So the first one is axial scanning. So you may have heard the term step and shoot. That's exactly what an axial scan is. It's typically used for head imaging when we do our heads without contrast. It's used a lot in cardiac scanning because we want to minimize any movement and have that better image quality. So in axial scanning, the X-ray tube makes an exposure, then the table moves to the next position, and then another exposure moves again, and then another exposure. So it's very common with head imaging, very common in cardiac scanning as well, okay? So that is your basic principle of your step and shoot. Now, what are the advantages of this? You get better image quality. Your images are nice and crisp. You get less noise. right? Because it's a step and shoot. So you get one exposure and then the table moves before it exposes again. So, however, you get higher radiation doses when it comes to axial scanning. Now, back in the very early days of CT, this was the first method of scanning that was used when CT scanners started to come into the market and for medical use, which took a very long time to acquire. Okay. And this type of scan mode is still used to this day on most CT scanners. Okay. I know there's a lot of brand new scanners out there that will do a helical head, and that is just what is installed in that protocol. But I can tell you that I would say 95% of CT machines that are out there across the country, they use axial mode for most head imaging and cardiac scanning. Now, the second scan mode is helical scanning. So this is when the table and the X-ray tube simultaneously move together to cover the required anatomy that you need to really quickly. Okay. Now, the downfall is that you get more noise when you do a helical scan. However, it's less radiation dose to the patient. So we have those filters and those kernels that kind of clean up that image so we get a nice quality scan. Okay. That is kind of the difference between those two scan modes. Now, helical scanning, slip ring technology has made continuous rotation scanners, so your MDCT, so your multi-detector, multi-slice CT possible. And that's why helical scanning is made possible through slip ring technology, where you have the X-ray tube and the patient table moving together. Okay. So another term that maybe you old school techs like me have heard, and maybe some of you brand new technologists haven't heard this or have and said, okay, what the hell is this? What does this mean? You might hear some old school physicians say something like, I need a spiral CT of the chest. So this is a very old term because in the early days of scanning, in order to do helical scanning, they had to order a spiral scan. That's exactly what it said in the order. And I'll tell you, I have a couple of physicians in my facility now that still use that term. Okay. One of them happens to be my interventional radiologist, and she just used that the other day. And I knew exactly what she meant. Some of the newer techs had no idea. Okay. So it's a very old term. It's the same thing as a helical scan. Okay. And that kind of sparked the creation of MDCT when we started to introduce spiral scanning. And that's when helical scanning came into play. Okay. So if you hear that term, that's exactly what they mean. Now, to kind of move a little bit, now we want to talk about pitch. Okay. So what is pitch? So that is the ratio of patient movement through the gantry in a 360-degree rotation to beam collimation. So in a nutshell, it's the speed of the table, whether the table's moving fast, whether the table's moving slow, as you're making that exposure. Okay. So this works in rotation with the X-ray tube. So typically with axial scan, you're going to get a lower pitch. Okay. So a very slow pitch. So slow pitch, where the table is moving very slowly, you get better image quality. However, you get higher radiation doses, but you get less noise because you want to clean up. You want that nice, good image quality. So with head imaging, you get that nice, slower pitch. Okay. Now, with a faster pitch, which that's typically what we use in helical scanning, it diminishes the image quality. So you get really shitty image quality, but you have the kernels and all the filters that go ahead and clean up those images, right? You get lower radiation doses, but you get less noise. Okay. Actually, you get more noise, excuse me, not less. So there's more noise, lower radiation, but the image quality is not the best. But that's why you have your kernels and your algorithms and your filters to clean up all that noise, right? So those are some basic principles when it comes to scanning parameters. Okay. Now we're going to talk about your X, Y, and Z axis because these are very important to know. Now, Your x-axis is typically your frontal plane. So what is the frontal plane? It's more commonly known as the axial plane. So that's what we scan typically in everyday scanning when we put the patients on the table. Okay, so that is what your x-axis is. Now your y-axis is your coronal plane. So we know in the coronal plane, we use a lot of that in post-processing. So after we've imaged, they want a sagittal coronal. So you get your coronal plane in that post-processing form. Okay. Now your z-axis. I talk about the Z axis in almost every podcast episode because it has to do with patient centering. So, your Z axis is also your sagittal plane. Now, your Z axis is very important when you are centering patients for CT exams to get a quality exam and to make sure that the CT system calculates the correct amount of radiation dose to the patient. Okay. I can't tell you how important it is. We have to make sure that we center those patients to the Z axis. So use your damn laser light. Don't guess. Okay. I say this in every episode because it's very important. So those are your axes that we typically use in CT. So make sure you get very familiar with them because they do come into play when you are scanning and setting up patients for exams. Now, we're going to move into a little bit more technical stuff where we're going to tell the difference between scan field of view and display field of view. Now, these two terms can be confused very, very easily, but they have completely separate functions, okay? So you have to make sure that you know how to separate both of them. So your scan field of view or your SFOV. So this is the area along the gantry where your raw data is collected and it's determined how much anatomy is going to be scanned or imaged. So in this principle, patient centering is everything. It's very crucial. It's very necessary because you don't want anatomy that is necessary, that is crucial to that scan, go outside of the scan field of view. Because guess what, guys? You're not going to be able to reconstruct it if it's outside of that. Okay. So I know people have tried to do that. You cannot do that unless it's within that scan field of view. Okay. So it has to be inside your lines, inside your box. Okay. Now, there's also your display field of view. Okay. So this is the area or section of the collected raw data that is used to create an image. So you scan your patient, you have your scan field of view. What pops up on your screen is your displayed field of view. If you went ahead and, either closed in or expanded your lines, depending on the area you're scanning. Okay. Now, the displayed field of view or the DFOV can be less or equal to the scan field of view. It cannot be greater than that. Now, remember what I said with scan field of view. You cannot reconstruct and display something that's outside of the scan field of view. So that's where the display field of view comes in, okay? Because if you scan outside of that, your display field of view is not going to show you that, okay? So it's very important that you get all crucial anatomy before you scan, set your scan field of view correctly, because what pops up on your image is exactly what you scanned. Now, like I said, these are two separate functions. They can be easily confused, so you need to know the difference, okay? And the last two principles that I'm going to talk about on this episode is your raw data versus your image data. Very important terms, okay? These two can also be confused, but they have entirely separate functions. So your raw data, these are your binary numbers that are collected by the X-ray signals from your CT detectors that represent an image, okay? So this is your raw data. This is stored on your local drive, okay? And if you ever need to go back into the raw data to make additional images, additional reconstructions, whatever the case is, like a 3D post-processing, your raw data is there to go ahead and, make those reconstructions off of that. Now, most CT vendors set up raw data to auto-delete, usually between 2 to 3 weeks, to preserve storage space, okay? Sometimes it could be a lot sooner than that because of the amount of capacity and the amount of scans that you're putting out, depending on where you work. Especially in a hospital, we have a lot of acuity, we have high capacity. So usually, sometimes even after a week, it's gone. Okay. So you're lucky if you get 2 weeks out of that. Now, your image data, this is also called your reconstructed data. So this is pixel information from your scan data that is used to display your images. Okay. So that's your image data. Okay. So that's after all the scan, it's gone through all the back filtration, pops up on your screen, and then you have it on your patient list. So on your exam list. Okay. So, and then this displays your images. Now, us as technologists, if we need to preserve space, we can delete the image data. However, it cannot be recovered. Let me say that again. We can delete this when we need to, create more space on our local drive. However, once you delete it, it's gone forever. Okay. So make sure you know the difference between those two principles. Make sure you know the difference between your SFOV and DFOV, because those are very important. So I hope that these strategies and these principles, when it comes to some of the physics that we use in CT, was helpful. Okay. I also dive a lot deeper in my coaching program on these principles, and I do teach more in depth in it. So if you're interested, make sure you check out the show notes. My program, I offer payment plans. It's a $5,000 program, and I coach and mentor you for 6 months to be the go-to CT tech. So, thank you so much, everyone, for listening to this episode. I hope you guys have a wonderful Thanksgiving, and I will chat with you after the holiday. Thank you for listening to this episode. If you would like to share your CT experience, have an interesting story to share, or need help in your CT training, please email me your questions at contact@thecteducator.com. Follow along on Instagram at the CT Educator, also on Facebook at the CT Educator. Don't forget to like, share, leave a 5-star review, as this will help support the show and it'll reach all of you that need guidance. Thank you for listening and happy scanning.